What's going on, YouTube? I'm your host, the Mad, the Dashing, Dash Jovis, and let's do some tier slop. So I've got hand traps listed out here, and we're just going to rank these hand traps in the September format by how good they are. At the top we have cards you always run. At the bottom we have the cards you just don't ever run. And then we have the cards that you'll occasionally or usually run, which is where most hand traps fall into, somewhere in the middle. So right now, Lancia isn't always run, Maxi isn't always run, Ash Blossom is a usually run, Meows, Perulia, and Fualos are usually run, Dominus Impulse and Dominus Purge are usually run, and Imperm is usually run. And like that's, you know, you could add in Droll in order to have a little bit of play into people's, like, into people's Ryzeal lists, and also it does help limit the board. But like everyone's on Lancia, everyone's always on a Maxi, and you're always on Ash unless you're a deck. The reason I'm putting Ash in usually run this time is because there are decks in the format that are lower to the ground that can play through Malcharmies and Maxi and not give too many draws, and so those decks might not want to run Ash Blossom. Because you can get away with cutting Ash Blossom and Called by the Grave and run higher impact hand traps. Malcharmies are all good. Which ones are the best kind of depends on the matchup you're in. Fualos and Meows, really good against Maliss. Perulia and Fualos, also both really good and paired together well against Ryzeal. So like you can pick a certain number of Malcharmies to go with your Maxi, and you usually will. I've been on Fualos. I think Fualos is the best of these usually run cards. Except maybe it's Ash, because you will literally not run Fualos in some decks because it's such a going second card that you will run Ash in because you are weak to Maxi. Dominus Impulse is better than Purge. Imperm is better than Purge. Impulse and Purge run together primarily and are very popular in Maliss and Tenpai. And they are good cards, but they're relatively low impact. So I've actually found myself either cutting or trimming copies of these, all format, and it hasn't like hurt. It seems to have helped in some situations at least. I'm going to say Shifter is a just don't. It doesn't stop Ryzeal from comboing off. I mean, it disrupts them a little bit, but it really doesn't stop them from comboing off. And it also doesn't stop Maliss from comboing off. It disrupts them a little bit, but it doesn't stop them from comboing off. So you're going to run one Shifter, base all of your hand traps in your deck around whether or not they work with Shifter, and then you're going to Shifter them and have them either not get a disadvantage at all, or in some cases get an advantage, because it actually enables some Maliss combos. Like, it's... I'm going to say occasionally run Droll. I am running it now. I think if you can Droll yourself, Droll is really good in this format, because we have, you know, all the Malcharmies and Maxi now. And I also think even if you can't Droll yourself, having like a couple Droll and an Imperm is kind of what I've done to approach the Ryzeal matchup, right? Reduce them to Detonator and then negate the Detonator, right? So I think you could even say usually run Droll, but again, it doesn't do anything against Maliss, and Maliss is the threat. Maliss is actually the problem. I'm going to say you occasionally run Bestial Magnamut. Bestial Magnamut is really good in Maliss because they're extenders as well as hand traps. And they have their targets in the format. You know, people are playing Tier, people are playing Fiendsmith engines and all kinds of things. Bestial Magnamut is really good in Dragon decks. Like, sometimes it's worth just running one Magnamut in a Dragon deck. But I'm going to say, in general, you don't really... It conflicts too much with Lancia, and everyone's on Lancia. So unless you have a reason to want Magnamut or your Maliss, and you have a reason to banish cards in your graveyard, there's no point in playing Bestials right now. But, you know, again, Maliss is a big outlier that makes it so that these are actually run pretty often, maybe even usually if we consider who's on Maliss. I'm going to say just don't run Ghost Bell. It's nice that it answers Called by the Grave, and it does have some targets, but like, I think DD Crow actually better right now than Ghost Bell and Haunted Mansion. There's a few graveyard decks that Bestials don't hit that DD Crow is really good against. Hitting spells and traps also really solid. I'm going to say occasionally run Gamma. Not because I think you should occasionally run Gamma, but because people are occasionally running Gamma. You know, if you're in a Primite deck, it makes some sense to have a Driver as your normal monster, for example. Or, like, you can run Delta, and you're answering Gold Sarcophagus and Malice in Underground, right? Like, as well as having your answer to 7th Tachyon and Bonfire, as well as having your occasional Gamma. And, like, if you're a deck that gets a lot going from playing a spell card with no monsters on the field, then Gamma becomes even better. Like, it just becomes an insane card, especially if you're doing it on your turn. But a 1-1 ratio is so bad that I would say just don't. Except that people are. People are doing it. People are still doing it. Ghost Reaper and Winter Cherries. I'm going to say just don't. Like, yeah, you can hit Ryzeal pretty hard by getting rid of all of their detonators, and you can hit Malice pretty hard by getting rid of their White Binder or their Allied Code Talker at Ignister. But then you're running those cards in your extra deck at a time when extra deck space is actually really tight in a lot of the best decks. And, like, I guess if your extra deck space isn't tight, you could say you occasionally run it as, like, a silver bullet option. But, like, realistically, getting rid of those two monsters doesn't even defeat those two decks, right? So I don't know if it's actually that good. I'm going to say Herald of the Orange Light is always run, provided you're a fairy deck. Like, there's no time you're going to be playing a fairy deck in this format that you're not going to run Herald of the Arclight. But, like, there's Melodious, and that's very, very rogue. Very, very rogue. So, you know, I wouldn't count on seeing a lot of this. But, yeah, if you can run it, then you do run it, right? Especially gross next to Eva, where you can send in an Eva to the graveyard to search it out again. Very gross. Of course, Drytron doesn't do the fairy stuff anymore, so that significantly reduces the number of decks that play Herald of the Orange Light. Don't play the other Heralds. They would be in don't play. They're just not mentioning hand traps that I think are irrelevant. I'm going to say Ghost Mourner and Moonlit Chill. Is it just don't? Ryzeal's putting up the cross before they put up the duo drive, and so they're going to be able to save their duo drive from it, and it doesn't hit the normal summon, which is actually what you want to hit with your imperms and effect failures a lot of the time right now in the format. That makes effect failures slightly better, but realistically the only reason you're running imperm in this format is to have a little bit of a better out to Ryzeal, which again effect failure doesn't do, because like Ghost Mourner, it gets negated by the cross. And so, like, yeah, just honestly veer away from the low impact hand traps. You should be running Ash in the event that you're weak to any of the Mulcharmies or Max C. But if you're not weak to any of the Mulcharmies or Max C, then you don't even have to run Ash in this format, in my opinion. I think you should replace it with something higher impact. And I would say Dominus Purge, likewise, Dominus Purge, Dominus Impulse, you don't have to run them. Don't feel like because you're playing Malice you have to run Dominus Impulse. Like, you should be focusing on having your blowouts. You should be focusing on having your Foolos, on having your Lancia, on having your Maxi. Maybe you even want some Perulia or some Droll, right? And then you can add the Imperm and the couple Dominus Impulse or whatever if you've actually got there. Like, these, for a long time, looked like they would be always run, but I think there's actually some pretty good reasons not to run them. And yeah, I think, well, Dominus Impulse is better against Malice and Imperm is better against Ryzeal, but Imperm has applications against Malice, provided they don't dodge you. And then I'm going to say usually run Nibiru, and I mean, I'm running one for crossout, but it's another high impact hand trap that you can draw into with your Mulcharmies that will win you a game if your opponent gets too greedy, right? Like, I crafted down my Nibirus and I'm regretting it because, like, for a long time I only felt like I needed to run one. And the reality is right now I'd probably be running 3 if I had 3. Instead I'm running Droll. It's an SR. Yep. Got those effect failures. I could craft them down in order to have Nibiru, but then the next time effect failure is good, I'll be in trouble. Yeah, I think Nibiru is very close to always run in this format because people are not respecting it, even though every deck has a way to play around it. I'm also finding that I get cooked by people pairing other hand traps with Nibiru, like Charmies obviously, but also like Imperm pairs pretty well. If you're running the Dominus cards, those can pair pretty well. Sometimes Nibiru can really screw you up after they Bestialed or DD Crow'd your play. I think DD Crow probably even worse than Gamma, just because like Gamma is Gamma, you know, but maybe not. Maybe the ratio of one driver to one Gamma makes it more like this. So yeah, I would say Maxi, Lancia, they're everywhere. You have to be prepared for them. You have to be running them right now. I would say if you're a fairy deck, you're running Herald of the Orange Light. I would say you're almost always running Ash Blossom and some Mulcharmies, and you're usually running the Nibiru, Imperm, Dominus cards. And then you're occasionally running things like Bestials or Droll, depending on your deck, or Gamma, or depending on your matchup spread, maybe a single DD Crow. And then just don't bother with Ghost Bell when you already have Lancia that does more than it and answers Called by the Grave. Don't bother with Shifter, which just doesn't have a lot of targets in the format, and don't bother with the low impact hand traps. And like maybe you could occasionally run Ghost Reaper and Winter Cherries, but I wouldn't recommend it. Alright, so that's Tier Slop for the day. Thank you guys for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. And bye!